Hey ghouls, gamers, and goblins, PotatoBagel here. It's been a minute, just got caught up playing the game of life, you know how it is. If you couldn't tell, this video is me going over some new additions to the roster of Pokemon Unite. These are not real, just some creations I came up with some cool effects and ideas that I think should be in the game. If you like this and want to see more, you know the drill. Slap those little YouTube doohickey buttons down there. You know the ones. Anyways, enjoy. Okay, what is up, ghouls, gamers, and goblins? PotatoBagel here. Right behind me is the PowerPoint presentation. Yes, this is indeed a PowerPoint presentation. Now, if you saw the intro bit, you know exactly what this is. I'm just going to jump right into it with our first Pokemon being Gulpin, and technically Swalot, since the game registers the playable Pokemon as their final evolution here. So my idea for Swalot is for it to be a defender. Obviously, this background is color-coded green, so you know that, but it's a defender, melee, attack-based, and its design here is very much reliant on poison. When going into this, I kind of designed it in a way to be a perfect counter to Venusaur. Not saying anything is wrong with Venusaur, but I'm saying it'd be interesting to have some of these defenders be sort of set up in a way to be counters to some of the attackers. But at the same time, this could also work very well in lane with Venusaur, and you'll see exactly what I mean. So I'm going to start off with the boosted basic, which is right behind me here. And essentially just pretty simple. Every third basic attack is boosted, and the boosted basic deals more damage, and it poisons the enemy for a short time, which does a little bit of damage over time, as well as lowers the effects of healing. Now that's very I should say that's kind of like the cursed items here, similar to how Chandelure's passive works similarly to a Slick Spoon bypassing the special defense. I figured the boosted basic should, lower the effects of healing like the cursed items do. Now, its first two moves here, Sludge and Acid Spray, are pretty straightforward. Sludge is just a simple projectile. You hit an enemy with it, and it leaves behind a puddle, which deals poison damage to anybody that steps in it. Now, these puddles are crucial to Swalot's passive. I'll get to that in a bit, but just keep that in mind, and you'll see more about his passive here with Acid Spray, as you fire a continuous stream of acid, and it says its duration is extended by liquid ooze, which is the name of its passive. Now, in the main games, liquid ooze essentially prevents its health from being drained. It would still take the damage from draining moves such as Giga Drain, Leech Seed, whatever, but instead of healing you back, it would actually damage you some more. So at level 5, Gulpin is going to evolve into Swalot. And I'll read what Liquid Ooze does right behind me. Now, this Pokemon builds up Liquid Ooze over time. Liquid Ooze empowers certain moves and prevents enemy Pokemon from draining health. This Pokemon is immune to the effects of poison and regains Liquid Ooze faster when standing in poison. Now, when I say prevents you from getting your health drained, what I'm really thinking of is that essentially a little bit of that meter will be detracted every time you are hit with any sort of move that has a drain effect, such as Venusaur's Giga Drain, or I think technically all of the all-rounders basic attacks because they have lifesteal. I think Spell Vamp is a little different. I could be wrong about that. I don't know. But as you can see, this Pokemon is immune to the effects of poison, which means that it can't be poisoned. Something like Sludge Bomb on Venusaur, Sludge Bomb Gengar, it's not going to work. And when it stands in it, it regains its Liquid Ooze faster. So hence why this seems like a perfect counter to Venusaur, as well as a perfect lane partner. Now, the direct upgrades to Sludge and Acid Spray, at least ideally, because a lot of, the Pokemon's kit tend to have moves that feel like more powerful versions of the starting ones, are right here, Toxic and Venoshock. Now, with Toxic, it essentially creates a large area of toxic waste. And this deals stacking poison damage to anybody that steps in it, as well as getting slowed. And it also functions a little bit like Aurora Veil on Ninetales, where all the basic attacks become boosted basics. Now, I decided on a stacking poison simply because that's all this move does. It is not a projectile, it sort of just kind of comes up from the ground. At least in my mind, that's how I see it. So I think a stacking poison would make it interesting, especially given that it is toxic, and toxic in the main games does continuously more damage over time the longer you stay in battle. Now, of course, obviously its basic attacks become boosted basic attacks when it stands in it, and this helps build up more of the Liquid Ooze. And Venoshock here is a direct upgrade to Acid Spray. where you fire, a beam of venom, I guess, which does more damage to Pokemon that are poisoned, and you continuously fire it as long as you have Liquid Ooze. So essentially, what you could do is stand in your Toxic with, an enemy also standing in a Toxic, and just point blank fire Venom Shock on them. And in the yellow here in the parentheses, those are the move upgrades that you get at like 11 and 13. So for Toxic, it's an increased duration, and for Venoshock, it's a decreased cooldown. Now, as for its other kit, we have Stockpile and Spit Up slash Swallow. Now, in my mind, this is really what makes Swalot unique. Instead of just being a hard counter, you can do something a little bit silly and goofy, kind of like Greedent. So with Stockpile, you store up energy in your body, gives you a little bit of HP, and it fills up the Liquid Ooze gauge slightly. And of course, this move has two charges, and when you use one, it also increases your defenses for a short amount of time. The upgrade to this is you gain a third charge. Now, with Spit Up slash Swallow, what it does is you essentially fire some of your Liquid Ooze just as like a little ball at an opponent dealing damage. It's like a ball of waste. And this waste, when it hits the ground, is going to slowly decay into a puddle. It's not as big as area as Toxic, and it is a slow decay. And the reason it's a slow decay is that you use Swallow to essentially pick it back up, getting more HP and refilling your Liquid Ooze gauge. The idea in my mind of how Liquid Ooze is similar to Dodrio's Sprint gauge, and this build here is kind of like Agility and Tri Attack, where Tri Attack doesn't actually use the Sprint gauge in order for it to be the range version. So I'm trying to do the same thing here, where Spit Up and Swallow, like, it does use it, but then you get it back type of thing. And as for its Unite move, I just had to come up with the stupid name for it. So it's essentially just kind of like Cramorant's Unite move, except you can move while using it, and it's just automatically fired. And this is kind of like what Sludge is, like the starting move Sludge, just as a sort of Cramorant Unite move on any enemies. And of course, for a short duration after using a Unite move, your Liquid Ooze refills faster. This is kind of like what Dodrio's does, except I'm not going to have it be that strong of an effect because that like refills instantly within a second or something like that. And that is Swalot. He stands into poison, is immune to poison, does a lot of stuff relating to poison, and I think it works very well as a defender because he has ways of gaining its health back, increasing its defensive with, Stockpile. But it's also doing a lot of chip damage with the poison, which prevents enemy Pokemon from scoring. That's how defenders work. They either have a lot of CC to push you away from the goals, or they do a lot of chip damage like Greedent's Bullet Seed to prevent you from scoring. So that's Swalot. Up next here we have Noibat, who is going to be a ranged special attacker. I want this to be kind of like a mage build, I guess is the best way to put it. So right behind me here, it's boosted basics. Works similar to Chandelure, except it's 4 seconds instead of 5, because all it is just increased damage and a little bit of an AoE, very small AoE. Now, Supersonic here just, fires a blast, which stuns opponents for a short period of time, and Gust is very similar to Cramorant's Feather Dance, I guess, or anything else like that, where it's just or I guess Charmander's Fire Spin might be closer, where it's just an area damage, pretty basic here, and it evolves at level 4 because it's like similar to Alolan Ninetales. It evolves at 4, it gets that big power spike. You kind of want this to be in lane, and your natural upgrades here are Boom Burst and Hurricane. So Boom Burst lets this Pokemon, essentially fire a blast, dealing damage and stunning opponents, just like Supersonic, just bigger. And you want that stun because you want to follow that up with Hurricane, which is a bigger area of dealing damage, but it also disperses the enemies outwards. Cramorant's Hurricane knocks enemies up. I kind of wanted this one to go out, kind of like you were sucked in the tornado and launched in a given direction. So that's kind of my idea with this. You stun them and then kind of spread them out, that kind of thing. Infiltrator, that is its passive right behind me. It's pretty standard, I guess. I don't know, nothing really power scaly here. But when this Pokemon initiates combat, it gains a boost to its movement speed for a short duration, and this has a 10-second cooldown. Relatively simple and straightforward. You kind of want the upper hand on using a move just to get that movement speed. I didn't know what else to do with it because its abilities are like Infiltrator and Frisk. So I thought Infiltrator would be cool for a movement speed. It kind of works well with this build, but it's actually going to work well with the other build here, which is Dragon Pulse and Tailwind. Now, Dragon Pulse is pretty straightforward. It's you just fire a beam forward, and any enemies that are close to you get pushed back. This is kind of like a Decidueye Leaf Storm. And Tailwind is very interesting, and I kind of like this. This is what sets Noivern apart from other mages. You know, the Boomburst Hurricane is very mage-like, but this build here isn't as mage-like, but it's still kind of like the unique thing, kind of like Dive Air Slash on Cramorant. So essentially what this does is you launch forward into a glide-like state, which also resets the cooldown of your other move. Now when you launch forwards, it's going to leave behind a wind, similar to Ho-Oh's Tailwind, because Tailwind boosts your team speed in the mainline games, and I still wanted that effect. So you essentially like rush forward and enter sort of like a glide state. I call it glide because you are flying, but you're not like above anything. It's kind of like Dragapult's Dragon Dance in that regard. So you have, you know, a wind behind you that also boosts the speed of your teammates moving in the same direction. You know, like Ho-Oh's Tailwind, Eldegoss's Leaf Tornado, stuff like that. But the glide state is essentially like Blastoise's Rapid Spin. You have hindrance resistance, and the mechanics of your other move changes. Now, with Dragon Pulse, essentially what that is it's relatively simple. You're still going to fire the beam forward, but you are going to continuously fire it forward as long as you are in the glide. And as for something like Boom Burst, when you use that with under the effects of Tailwind, you essentially just do AoE around you. Instead of it being forward, you do an AoE burst. Oops, wrong way. There we go. You do an AoE burst around you in Tailwind. And of course, you know, the upgrade to this is increased duration. Dragon Pulse has increased damage. Upgrade Boom Burst stuns longer, and Hurricane has a decreased cooldown. Now, as for its Unite move at level 8, in my mind, I kind of envision this as a mix between Boom Burst and Dragon Pulse. Those are two very iconic moves I see Noivern using. And essentially what it is you use Boom Burst uh, in an area around you, like you would under the effects of Tailwind, and then you enter a state of flight, exactly like Charizard's Unite move. So you do a burst, enter a state of flight, but while you are in the state of flight, you essentially are firing down a beam constantly, like right below you, and you kind of move that around. I think of this as, I guess visually it'd be like when you summon Deoxys in Smash Bros, like out of the Pokeball, and it fires that Hyper Beam like straight through the middle of the stage or something like that. That's what I'm seeing here. You kind of, you know, AoE around you, fly up, do, you know, a massive beam just straight down, and you move that around, and that's its Unite move. Relatively simple, straightforward. I think it's cool. Honestly, I might be underselling these a little bit, but I don't know how to do this without, you know, really going into the nitty gritty. I'm choosing to avoid numbers unless there's like a basis for it, because you know I just want the effects to be understood as opposed to balance within the game, because the game is, you know, balanced every other Thursday, that type of thing. And up next we have Staryu as a supporter. This one is fun. Um, it's boosted basic. You know, every third attack it deals more damage as well as restores a little bit of HP. Now I don't know if any other Pokemon has that effect, because I know the all rounders have natural lifesteal. Some of the attackers have like spell vamp, stuff like that. I don't think any of the supporters have this really. I know most of them are like it deals special attack damage instead. But I think with Starmie, I want its basics to also do special attack damage because this is a ranged special attacker. So its starting moves here are Bubble Beam, pretty simple. You fire a beam of bubbles, and any Pokemon hit by them gets slowed and damaged, as well as Harden. Now, Harden here, it just boosts your defenses and gives you a boosted basic, and the duration of that defense boost is kind of extended with Analytic. Now, Analytic is what I designed here for Starmie's passive, and essentially what it is the longer you stay in combat, the more this meter builds up. I think of Analytic as obviously analyzing the opponent, so you need to stay in combat in order to do this. And if you go out of combat, it's going to slowly decrease. Kind of like a Buzzwole's muscle gauge to that extent. So it's not going to be as long, or I guess I should say, with something like Harden boosting your defenses and having a meter to determine its duration seems kind of busted, but I figured that the rate at which it drains the analytic meter would be very much, you know, I guess would be fast, is what I should say. And right here, I said moves affected by analytic can be canceled at any time. So really, if you're using a move that is affected, like analytic, which is typically the second move here, like harden, we have camouflage on screen right here, your analytic meter will not increase. It will decrease as you are under the effects of these moves, but if you stay in combat, it will build back up. So at level 4, you can pick Hydro Pump here, which is a series of forceful blasts of water, dealing damage and pushing enemy Pokemon backwards. Very similar to Blastoise. I think a lot of other. I don't. Does another Pokemon have Hydro Pump? I don't think so. I think it's just Blastoise that has Hydro Pump. No, Clefable's Unite move does Hydro Pump, similar, same thing. And Camouflage here. Now, Camouflage is essentially like Sableye's Shadow Sneak, where you activate it and you become camouflage. You're sort of like transparent, and you can't be targeted by short hit moves, as well as obviously you have the defense. You have the defense boost here because it's like a natural upgrade of Harden, and obviously while camouflaged, your other move, in this case Hydro Pump, is going to have increased effects. In that case, it's just going to be increased damage for Hydro Pump. And I don't have it written here, but essentially using your other move is kind of going to cancel out camouflage automatically. So, but you can stay in camouflage longer just without using your move. And of course, this duration is extended by analytic. Now, as for the other move, we have recover and rapid spin. Now, recover is very simple, straightforward. It's just healing in an area for yourself and your allies. That's fine. Obviously, you have increased healing at the move upgrade. And rapid spin is very interesting. Now, the way I see Starmie spinning here is kind of like in Smash Bros. When you get the Pokeball and you summon Staryu, and it kind of does Swift, that kind of spinning. Except it's going to be above everybody, kind of like above a teammate. I was thinking about having it lock on, but I feel like that'd be very similar to Comfey and not as interesting. So you kind of have to like hover above a teammate or an enemy, depending on which move you have here, and stay above them, try and follow them. And so while spinning, you have boosted defenses, hindrance resistant, and your other move, like recover here, is going to be healing raindrops, while Hydro Pump is going to be damaging raindrops. I thought about having both, but that seemed kind of busted, so it's one or the other. And as for its Unite move, it's a very similar thing, except you're going to spin in a wide area. I'm moving my hand, even though I'm a potato, so that doesn't work here. But it's kind of like you let it rip like a Beyblade, and you sprinkle down raindrops, which does healing for your allies as well as damaging for your teammates. And that is Storm. Very simple supportive, very pushes back enemies, can heal you if you want, just kind of like in your face, similar to what you can do with Eldegoss sometimes. And that's it. I've got Swalot, got Noivern, got Starmie. These are just three very simple Pokemon that I designed here that I think would be very cool to have in Unite. So thank you guys for tuning in, watching this. I feel like I kind of sped through this, but that's okay. I did what I had to do. Hope these ideas make sense to you. Thank you, and stay tuned for more.